Welcome to The View with Vertex, the show that takes you behind the scenes with some of the most influential people, personalities and companies shaping the scaffolding industry. This next episode is brought to you by Scaffchamp, powered by Layher. Layher are an absolute juggernaut of innovation and efficiency within the scaffolding sector, along with their great partners Kewazo. Kewazo are doing great things to address labour shortages and the risks of manual handling in the construction industry. I truly hope you enjoy this episode. If you do, all I ask is that you like, subscribe and get notified every time we drop a new episode. Thank you and enjoy the episode. Welcome back to a very special edition of The View with Vertex. We are recording live from Scaffchamp, powered by Layher. A former employer, former colleague, managing director of Simian International, Simian Skill. Ian, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Isaac.
I hope I've not misrepresented you there in any way in the intro.
No. The shorter intro, the better for me.
Well, you're a former employer, so I used to work for you guys at Simian.
Yeah.
And definite now, I mean, I've probably never said this to you face to face, but definitely someone who I consider a mentor. So, opportunity to thank you for that.
No, thanks very much. I'm more of a relaxed guy these days.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
So, how's life treating you?
Life is great.
Yeah.
Yep. Kids, grandkids, everything like that. Life is great. It's simple.
I should probably say this as well. This is probably going to be like a bit of a precursor to a feature-length episode that we're going to do back at the studio in Manchester. You turned 60 this year, right?
I'm in July, end of July, 60. So, yep. 38 years in
as good a time as any to share a lot of experience in both operationally and from the current position you're in now with the consulting and the training.
Yeah, I've been servicing fittings in the yard all the way up to owning my own company, and in safety I've advanced scaffolder, all types of systems. So I've got a well-rounded sort of like a view on the world, shall we say, you know.
Yeah, well, view on the world, I mean, is there any way you've not been?
Yeah, I've not been to Thailand because I've not been allowed to go.
I don't think I'm allowed either.
If I was allowed to go to Thailand, I would have been divorced 20 years ago, you know. So I'm not, you know, so places like that.
It seems like, Simian International. I was only speaking to Frank a couple of minutes ago on the last episode. Places, you could probably add a few to this, but Dubai, Qatar, Oman, Chennai in India. There was one, Russia at one point, Ivory Coast. Have I missed any?
Nigeria.
China. The list goes on.
Yeah, it does go on as well. Yeah, there's quite a lot. There's quite a lot of interest as well in other African countries, and also I'd like to bring the brand into Europe.
Yeah. What do you think it is about UK training that makes it so appealing to these other countries around the world?
The one thing about UK training is it's rigid, and there's no flexibility. When I first arrived in the Middle East, you could do a scaffolding course in an apartment. So we used to say, do you do the cantilever out the window, you know, and things like that, you know. So we looked at different parts of the world. We've been in Algeria, Albania, also Cameroon. You know, we've been to training courses in Cameroon where we had to wait for them to move the cows off the field so they could be trained, you know what I mean, and things like that. There's all sorts of comedy that we've had over the years. We went to Turkey to start a partnership, and the guy had about enough layer to do a one-lift tower. Yeah. And we said, you're going to need a bit more of that, pal.
It's honestly, some of the things that you see elsewhere, I mean, I'm not going to name the name on air, but when I first went to Australia to do my scaffolding qualifications, I went into this guy and he said, right, your course is on Tuesday. He said, I want to see your certificates and your cards. So I'd done my advanced at Training 2000 in 2010. This was like now 2012, but I've worked away a lot, never had the opportunity to, to do the MVQ part of it. So I gave the secretary my Part 2 card, and I gave her my advanced certificate. So we get like in the morning, everyone's dead nice, friendly. How's it going? Yeah, nice to be where you living, where you staying, etc. It's nice. Went upstairs, sat down in the classroom. The instructor comes walking in. He goes, Isaac Morrison. I said, yeah, that's me. He goes, outside. So I popped outside and he said, why are you trying to pull the wool over my eyes? I said, can we just start again? I said, what do you mean? He said, that's not an advanced card, is it? I said, no, it's a certificate. I never said it. Well, you asked me for my cards and my certificates. That's what I've got. Bearing in mind, this is only a 2-day course. So I said, look, I said, let's just start again. I just want to do my course. I said, if I'm not advanced, just you train me as much as you think you need to get me to advanced. I'll pay the money. It's fine. So he goes, right. He said, I'm going to cut you a deal. He said, just know that you can't pull the wool over my eyes. And he said, we'll start again. Anyway, next day goes into the classroom. Oh, sorry, the same day. Go back into the classroom. There's the answers. There's the questions. Copy the answers onto the questions. I was like, okay. Next day, we go out into the training area. He said, see that 8-foot quick stage bay there? He said, knock that down for us. All right. You must want a bit of extra room in the training area. We knocked the 8-foot quick stage bay over, stripped it. He said, well done, boys, you've passed. After all this spiel about, don't you pull the wool over my eyes, you could go out there and kill somebody. The levels of training that you see elsewhere, and I do believe, by the way, that it's getting a lot better in Australia. I'm not like throwing those guys under the bus. I know they do a lot of great work.
We sent a guy over to Australia to do a 5-day basic course, mystery shopper, so to speak. He's been an instructor, he's an advanced scaffolder, he's also an inspector around the north of England. And we fired him over there. And he did a 5-day course, and we told him to act as you know nothing. And he was just labouring. And on day 3, they had to do a return with Layher, and the instructor who was teaching them didn't know how to do the return. So he went over to the other instructor, who wasn't sure either. So they wasn't sure to do a fly past or a short bay. Yeah. And the guy who we sent was desperate to tell him. And it was it was the hardest thing that he'd ever done to make them try and work it out for themselves.
Yeah.
And he said to me, it's been the most difficult. He said, but everybody at the end of the course, every single person who was on it said, we'd take you anywhere because you'd be a great groundy, he called him. And he thought to himself, I've got 25 years experience as a scaffolder.
Yeah.
You know, but that was what we came across there, and that's why we started a company and decided we were going to start training in Australia. But there is a lot of loopholes to get through with the safe work at height and the government areas, and then it's rigging and dogging and all sorts. There's so many things involved, and VOCs. And I was in a car one day where one training centre rang up and said, I'm having to tell everybody how to get through these VOCs.
Yeah, there was a lot of that.
And we said, well, isn't a VOC that pass or fail? But he was saying, I'm supposed to have them here for half day, but I've got them for a full day because I'm teaching them how to answer the VOCs. And we thought,
it's verification of, for those who don't know, by the way, verification of competency.
So you're
either competent or you're not. And if you're not, then it's nobody's job to get you through the course, surely.
Many years ago, I was doing a presentation to the HSE, and there was a lady on there called Angelica, and she might still be there or she might be retired, but what she didn't know about engineering, she just hadn't been thought up. She was so clever. And one day she said, on this course, she just said to me, what we do with is, if it's rubbish in, you'll get rubbish out. And she was a bit more sort of like...
articulate about it than that.
A bit more articulate. Well, no, she was
a bit more abrupt.
A bit less articulate about that. She was a Scottish lady, and she put the fear of God into everybody wherever she went, because she would just tie engineers in knots, left, right and centre. She's brilliant. Great at her job. Made good friends with her in the end. And we used to talk a lot about all different things. And she would go to anywhere and she'd come to us with questions, and a lot of the times, the questions, it was like a 747 going over your head, because it was that technical. Mm-hmm. But she knew her stuff, and she drove scaffolding companies mental around the UK with all the knowledge.
But I mean, I guess with verification of competence, put my teeth back in, the idea of it is really good. I actually think, this whole thing about the quality of scaffolders now, I know there's this huge debate raging back home, about scaffolders and the training scheme and how it needs modernising and how this, that and the other, some of the trainers need to step into the 21st century. And I get that. I agree with some of it, but I think some of it maybe is slightly sensationalist, you know?
Let me take you back to the start, right? When we started Simian in 2005, we wanted to open a training centre. So in 2007, we opened a training centre, and it was probably the week before the big bang in the economy. And we just looked at each other and said, what are we going to do? You know, we've got this 13,000 square foot building, you know, probably 6.5 of it's just fresh air.
This still Birchwood.
This is Birchwood Park.
It's a huge place, isn't it?
So we looked at it and we'd worked, myself and Simon, and we had some people in helping load the racks. And we worked all day, all night, all weekend, and we were doing all sorts. And we were absolutely drained. And then the economy banged probably the week we opened. And we were like, oh my word, what are we going to do now? But to tell you about this, right, we sat down with Scissors and we gave them some pointers onto the training scheme. And over the years, we've sort of like enforced the 70 square metres where people work. And that's become into the scheme rules. And we also, well, Simon wrote the scheme rules. And then they've been added on since. But the original scheme rules were instructors must have a petals or some teaching qualification. And there was areas in there where you could go and do a level 2 MVQ. Somebody could just rock up, do an MVQ level 2 or an MVQ 3 level 2 for you for 150, 200 quid. You could then do a part 1, part 2, get a card. So we sat down and said to them, look, we need to have a skills test.
Yeah, to do away with the fabrication. And
to do away with, if you had a touchscreen test, a part 1, part 2, and an MVQ, you could be a scaffolder. So you could hold a 21-foot tube over Marks and Spencer's in Manchester from my training centre.
Yeah.
And you could, let me just coin a phrase, right? In the UK, people say scaffolding's not brain surgery. But a brain surgeon can only kill one person. A scaffolder could take a family out with one tube or the wrong ties or anything like that. So for me, it's important. And I always had this feeling that I want people to leave my training centres with a level of competence that they can work. So I don't have a problem if people fail. I've had companies ring me up and say, you've sent me this guy back after his part 2 one-day skills test and he's no good at bird cages. And I say to them, you were his work-based recorder on the MVQ and you've signed to say that he's built and taken down 3 bird cages competently, leading, before you've sent him back to me to do his skills test. And the phone usually goes quiet at the other end.
One of us is...
So I hear a lot of people, they complain about the scheme, they talk about the scheme, they say many things about the scheme. However, if I was putting a scheme together tomorrow, or if anybody was putting a scheme together tomorrow, what would you put on that course? Tower, independent, birdcage. They're the 3 basic scaffolds. So anybody says tomorrow, I'm going to start a level 1 course, what are you going to put on it?
Oh, absolutely.
Nothing different to what's on the what's on the Scissors level 1 now.
This is what I think people need to sort of get on board with. Is like, we don't need, just because there are elements that need more. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. Like those scaffolds, they, you know, you're right. They are the most basic and common types of scaffold that anyone's going to build. I think maybe adding things like a hacky staircase, because I know we're at Layher, but it's probably one of the most common types of staircases you're going to use, and then having a Layher ring lock qualification attached to as well instead of the putlog scaffold. I think by putting those 2 scaffolds into the course, and I know there are logistical issues, and there are issues with one training centre's got that equipment, another training centre hasn't. You need some sort of transitional period, but for everyone to have a ring lock qualification and hacky staircase on the back of the card after doing the part 1 and part 2, I think you'd be setting them up for a a better career in the industry. But the tweaks, they're not reinventions, you know.
I mean, it sounds good. Sounds good. I don't think it's a bad thing. I mean, for the staircase, but you then have the people who own the brands.
Yeah.
Want people to do the 2 days, and then you've got people who've got copies. So you've got certain hire and sales companies who've got different types of staircases. And then we say, well, you know, that looks like a hacky. That one looks like a layer. That one looks like something. Then it just starts to get all complex. There's a lot out there, and you will find that a lot of the people who own the brands are extremely protective.
Yeah.
So if you say, well, if I give you this, that'll work for that. One of the companies would, let me give you an example, right? And it's probably an interesting example. I went to inspect a scaffold about 15 years ago. It was made up of layer and scaffold.
Yeah.
And I said, well, how do I know these will work together?
Yeah. And what am I inspecting it to?
And he said to me, well, I've got a letter off scaffold that it's compliant. So I then went to layer and said, what's your answers? Layer can't be used with any other system.
Yeah.
So I said,
so who'd you believe?
I said, you've got a problem. So he had to go away and get engineering calculations and everything to prove that, you know,
Yeah, what he built essentially wasn't going to...
And it still didn't satisfy. And he ended up, because it just didn't work properly, he ended up, you know, removing the scaffold components and filling up with layer. And it was an area, because he was probably busy. He didn't want to buy anymore. He didn't want to buy anymore, you know.
Yeah, I've seen it happen on a site in Manchester. It was while I was working for Simian. I was like, looked at some of the rosettes and they're like, they're round. And then the other ones had little divots in them. I'm like, they're not the same. They're not the same system.
Yeah.
But like, at least some of the copies have like the same
Yeah.
base sizes. This didn't even have the same base sizes. This was like two completely different products that they tried to mash together. I was like, you can't sign that off. Nobody could, do you know what I mean? But yeah, you do find this happening.
It's an interesting world, isn't it? You know, and I think if you take it back to basics, and I like to go back to basics, is it can it fall down? Can anybody fall off it, or can anything fall off it? I think once you start there, you're probably looking at a good scaffold if you tick them 3 boxes.
Yeah.
Outside of that, you can then go in and say, have you done pull tests? Have you, you know, just...
Which kind of falls into the box of, can it fall over? You know, is it properly stabilised?
Yeah.
You know, but you're right. I always say that, you know, the exact same thing.
Well, I go to some beauties. I went to a beauty about 3 days ago where instead of them lapping boards on the return, they'd lap boards in the middle. They put a set of 13s across, 2 sets of 13s. And
nothing to support them underneath.
Oh, yeah. What they had.
Oh, the old pyramid tranny, was it?
No. They had a transom and a board at an angle.
Yeah.
And then a board at the other side. So it was a pyramid of boards, really.
Yeah.
Not really a pyramid of...
I've seen so many different solutions to that, like, self-caused problem. Like, one, I do get it. If you can, use boards of the correct size. But, you know, some small companies you work at, you've got a choice of 13s or 13s, and you've just got to make it work. But to support the underneath, you can put a secondary standard in on the outside, put a tube up underneath on doubles. Same way that you would with a display.
I think if you're on price and you want to get there, you know, there was
those pyramid transfer.
There was a 2.1 metre lift followed by a 2.4 metre lift.
Yeah.
So I'm looking straight away and I'm saying, I'm asking questions. Did you build that? How do you build that safe? No handrail. Oh, we use the scaff step. I said, have you got extra rungs on yours? I said, because you've got a 2.4 metre lift there, you know. And you could be the most sarcastic man in the world, but you just have to act professional, don't you?
Yeah. You do have to try and bite your lip a lot.
You know, when I first started doing a bit of auditing, I forgot I was a lot older. And one of the scaffolders came up and they said to me, you know, what do you think of my job? You know, dead proud. I said, have you got any pride in your work? You know, I thought to myself, you know, you're a bit old for this now, Ian. You know what I mean? He might put you on the floor. You know.
Yeah. But I mean, sometimes you think, what were you thinking when you did that bit? Like,
yeah. What are you thinking when you've got like 10 sleeves all the way up the scaffold, all in the same bay.
Yeah.
Have you not thought about maybe, you know, staggering or splicing or things like that? And I look and I always think to myself, you know, I constantly look and I say to people, it's basics. You come through the door, the first week of your training will tell you to stagger sleeves.
Yeah.
And you bang them all in the same bay. And you think, well, that'll be all right.
Yeah, everything's all right until it's not. And I guess you've probably seen a lot of when it's not. I mean, you guys were involved from an expert witness perspective with Milton Keynes and stuff like that. And like this.
Yeah, Simon was Milton Keynes, yeah. There's a video floating around online that is used on every temporary works coordinator's course that you go on.
It's you, innit?
And it is me.
Yes,
and I didn't know till I actually went on the temporary works coordinator course, and the guy said to me, I can't show that video now because you're on the course. And I went, which video is this? And he said, the Milton Keynes one. And I said, all right, fair enough. And then one of my best friend's sons went on the temporary works coordinator course 3 weeks ago because I advised him to do it. And he texted me afterwards and said, you're on the video. And I was like, I can't believe it's still showing that. Milton Keynes was 2005, 2003 maybe.
The one that we always use on the training course, you'll know yourself, is Cardiff. And Cardiff was 2000, but they probably are two of the standout, you know, collapses.
I got that video off Roy because I did Roy's advanced scaffold inspection, and he gave me that video because I was talking about Cardiff. He went, I've got a great video. I went, give us it then.
Yeah.
And he gave it me. I said, we'll use it on all the courses.
Yeah, there's that one, and then a couple of guys have shared the dismantle. And when I heard about that, the dismantle of Cardiff after the collapse, someone said, yeah, they asked us to do it with man rider baskets and still saws. And I was like, it sounds like one of them tall tales. And then I saw the video.
Yeah, it's
I
out
was
there.
like, you'd never sign that off now in a million years, would you? You'd never say. You'd be like, long reach, demolition, let's pull it down from a safe distance. So I've guys up there, like, if you cut the wrong bit and it's under tension, it's like...
It's
Say, see you
interesting
later,
to watch, isn't it? You know, but, you know, when you're on £1,000 an hour for no trains running, got to find a way to get it down, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and also, there's also, I've seen some horrible things, don't get me wrong. But, you know, I've been to one at Manchester on Deans, just off Deansgate. There's a horrible one where a guy got a block on his head from a height.
Yes.
And
I was on that job, actually.
he was on that job, yeah.
Yeah,
So I was there. I was there the next day. Sorry, I knew what had happened. I was there the next day, and we were looking at all different things. And I knew the safety director of the main company really well, and he was a cracking fella. And you know, and I think we've had another one where a guy lost his leg from lifting with a high ab and it tipped, and all the 21s came down and took his standing leg away. And
I'm going to sound like a bloody bad omen here, but
don't tell me he was on that one.
no,
as well.
but I work for the company, and my former business partner and one of my best mates, he was there. On the scene, said absolutely horrendous.
Oh yeah.
It just shows you, you know, people.
I didn't go to that one.
Yeah,
Simon went to that one.
Yeah,
We just got called away. That was it. You know, same again.
yeah. People complain about the, you know, the health and safety and the audits, and like nobody it looks forward to the audit, right? But it's things like this. I mean, to take the whole episode full circle, it's things like this that are why the UK is held in such high regard, because we do put a lot of procedures and a lot of layers of safety in place to you know, thankfully in the UK these things are rare, and you know, we know about them.
Well, there's a few things that go on a regular basis. I mean, if you talk about expert witness, when you get an expert witness, it's normally 2 years after. You will be given your information 2 years after. So you just have to float through what's in disclosure. So you'll get a pack and it will say, this was the scaffolder, this who was trained by, this is what happened, this is this. I mean, I had an aluminium tower once where they dropped an aluminium tower off, no manufacturer's instructions. Bloke was 68 years old, said, I'll knock it together, fell off it and died. You know, so I was in the coroner's court there. And the coroner, they can write things, they can put things into law in a way, the coroners, because they're all, you know, they're like doctors and a lawyer combined, aren't they? So they they then wrote and said...
Yeah, I guess it goes into case law.
They would write into, say, for instance, PASMA, or into the HC and say, look, every time a set of alloy tower goes out, the manufacturer's instructions must go with it. Because they said that they had left it in between, like you lay the frames down, so they had it in there, Could have posted it through his letterbox, couldn't they? But they left it there. And that was really the scenario with that. And it didn't have enough components, what they dropped off and everything like that, and he didn't have enough handrails. And he got on the top of it to paint the side of his house, fell off and died. So it's somebody's granddad, isn't it?
Yeah.
And
I think that's what people, don't. When you hear about these tragic events, the real human cost, not just someone's lost their life. It's like say someone's granddad.
2 to 3 years afterwards, that's when you sort of get that paperwork and you've got to delve through it. Is he trained? No. Did they give him any instructions of how to use it? No. So it obviously he's gone through the phone book. Somebody's 100 quid, somebody's 80, someone's 75, the 75 one, or maybe, I'm only hypothetical there, but that's the way you say, and you think you're getting like for like, don't you? Apples for apples. And this is the training side of things is, you look and you say, did he get that cantilever training in the apartment or did he actually build something in a training centre? And that's when you really whittle it down, to the nitty gritty of things. And that's when you normally, to give you an example, I was working on an expert witness case. This is when I did it. And there was a man who died at the bottom of a ladder. The ladder access had no gate on. And there was a porch, like them Tudor houses where they stick out a little bit.
Yep.
There was a 2-board run by the side of the ladder, and he was found at the bottom of the ladder. So we went to this meeting. There was me, who was a barrister, a lawyer, insurance man, and the people who was battling against it, and they had an expert. So the barrister, after all the conversations and everything, said, he might have been carrying a tube up the ladder, threading it onto a loading bay and all these things. And they were wiggling on the worm at the end of the rod, as per usual. And then the barrister said, I don't want to dishearten you, said, but keep it simple, he said. The judge will go, gap in the ladder, small walkway, man at the bottom. He went, he'll go for the path of least resistance.
Yeah.
And he said, and one of their experts said to the barrister, can I just ask you a question? Do you know much about construction? He went, yeah, I laboured on building sites for 2 years before I joined the army. They went, we might as well close our books now then. And that was it. That was over and done with. I walked out of the door, bloke said to me, send the invoice. And that was that. It was over and done with. And I thought to myself, you've questioned his competence. He's put you back in your box.
Yeah.
So you never know who you're up against.
No, that's it. That really is.
So you have to be properly professional, and I always find when there's a slump in work, you get more of these expert witnesses and claims. And at the moment in time, you're grafting constantly and nobody's looking for work because you can down tools today and work for somebody tomorrow. You probably get lower expert witness work.
Yeah, because everybody wants to stay in work.
Yeah, everybody's doing well.
Yeah.
So why say, I'm looking for trouble,
Yeah.
You don't, you might get the odd one of somebody saying, I've tripped over a brace or I've cut my ankle on a swivel that's sticking out at the bottom. And they're just basic errors by scaffolding companies. Mm-hmm. And they're daft, really, because if you've got a £5,000 excess in your company and that claim comes to 3, that's coming out your pocket, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you've got to then think to yourself, I've got to do it right because all of my profits are getting taken away on small claims.
Yeah. Yeah, and even like this is why I always try and encourage companies, as soon as possible. I mean, I guess there's a lot of like elitism in the scaffolding industry where everyone thinks that every company's got to be a Linden or Connolly's do a great job and like some of these really big, well-established companies. But there is still a room for the little guy who's I hear the word transit bandit all over the place, but there is still room for good, small scaffolding companies. But the challenge they're up against is those margins are razor thin, and it only takes you drop something off the side of the scaffold, break someone's paving flag. That literally could be, for that job, your entire margin gone.
Well, I've audited 3 excellent companies over the past, well, it's been nearly 6 months. One in Selby, really take it serious. One in Derby, another one, really cracking company. And another one in the northeast, Chesterley Streetway. And them guys are, all of the MDs are in the 30s. And they're obviously taking the companies off their dads, their uncles, and one of them's started up on his own really, and they wanted to be NASC members. They want to be in there. One of the companies had already been given 3 or 4 contracts on the basis we only take NASC companies, so you need to be in there to do it. Yeah. And I went in and I told him that he had something to do, and he brought the men in Good Friday and got that training done to get himself into the organisation.
Yeah.
So that's commitment. He would have had to pay all these guys double time. He would have had to pay the instructors and the company more money. But his commitment is there, and I see that commitment in a lot of companies. I see commitment around. People do want to be better. People want to, and the biggest problem in the UK is what they say is labour. You know, and it's a difficult area because, you know, I was talking to Dave Abe when I was doing an audit the other week, and he was in there, and he told me that he's brought 250 people into the industry through the prisons.
Yes, I've actually delivered some of the courses.
250 people. I mean, it's a massive achievement.
Yeah.
That.
And a lot of them staying as well.
And he's been in the Houses
of... was keeping people in.
He's been in the Houses of Parliament a week before I went. And I said, when I went, I had imposter syndrome. He went the same for me as well.
Yeah.
I
felt more comfortable in the prisons, to be honest with you.
He went in and he said to me, his exact words was, he went in and he sat down. And they went, cameras rolling, like this now. And that was, he had to speak in there. I said, well, that was lucky for me. I said, because I was in the conservatories at the side, listening to somebody else speak.
Yeah.
But, you know, like you say, I mean, I laugh really because when I do some audits with Trevor, who works for Scissors, you know, me and him where was we? We was at Tiananmen Square in China. And he said, come a long way since oiling fittings, haven't we, you know?
Absolutely. You know, you took the words right out of my mouth.
You know, we just laugh about these things.
To stay from oiling fittings. And I do this to myself, you know, with myself every now and again. I think I've gone from that painting fittings for Allied, you know, when I was James Briley's actually here now with a team from also. Like I used to work for him as a labourer in the yard. To go from that to then working in Germany and Malta and Australia and doing podcasts and, you know, visiting the World Scaffolding Championships in Vilnius, Lithuania. Like you think to yourself, how has this happened? From what would that kid in the yard have said if you'd have told him this is what life's going to be? Well,
it's a funny thing, isn't it? You know what I mean? Because James is here. I was James's safety advisor, 2003. I was with Ollie from Connect in 2003 as safety, and also Mark at Star as well. And then I was on the contracts committee with Mark as well. We go back quite a way, you know what I mean? So it's great
like to see him all
meeting of old friends, isn't it?
Yeah. This is what I've loved so much about the event. It's just so many people, you know, old and new. Do you know what I mean? Meeting people from all around the world. It's a great place to be. And a lot of, I think Frank was sat where you're sat now, and he said it's some of the greatest minds in scaffolding, all sharing ideas. Well,
like I say, me and Frank met in Montreal about 7 or 8 years ago at the Scaffold SAIA, I think it is. And, you know, and then we've both got mutual friends with the guy in New York as well. So it's like, scaffolding's what we call in the world now is, I've always called it, is ever decreasing circles. And it's circles within circles. So, you know, in the world of scaffolding, it's like, do you know him? No. Do you know him? Yeah. And that's
Yeah.
that's at the world
Like
of
that 6
scaffolding.
degrees of separation almost.
Yeah, I've just been talking to the guys from Mongolia, and there's a guy who lives half a mile from me, drinks in the same pub, who's their boss.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I said to him, "Do you know Steve?" And they were like, "Steve, yeah, he's taught me how to do this, this, and this."
Yeah.
Do
The
you know?
Mongolian team were great last year, by the way.
And I was with Steve, and I asked him if he was coming here, and he said no because some of the guys that they had on the construction have gone over to the maintenance, and these are the guys who've come over now. They're the maintenance team. So that tells you, right? I'm talking to a guy, Mongolia.
Yeah, you put it like that. You're talking to a guy from Mongolia, and then within a couple of questions, like you both got a common.
Yeah. And then I talked to Steve, and I said, "Are you on that mine?" "Yeah, I'm on that mine." I said, "Well, do you know Damien, who's a friend of mine from Australia, was going to that mine?" So he said, "Well, I'll buy him a drink when I see him." So we've got a guy from Perth, Australia. We've got people from Mongolia, people from Fleetwood in Lancashire, like me.
Yeah.
And we're all
some idiot from Moston, Manchester.
and we're
who does
all
a scaffolding podcast.
and we're all connected through scaffolding.
Yeah, yeah. And long may it continue. Long may it continue.
Oh, it's great. Yeah, I might be 60 in July, but I'm hoping for another 10 years.
Yeah,
you know.
you look fighting fit, by the way. I'm sure.
I'm over 3 stone lighter since since I was out of breath walking around Kathmandu.
Yeah. yeah. You look fighting fit. Definitely another at least 20 years in of.
I don't know. No, I don't know about that.
Yeah, you'd be like John Ward.
No, John Ward's my hero. We were 1992. We were both on the spanners together.
Yeah,
me, John, and his other mate Steve, and it was, they were the.
You used to go on audits with him when I was first shadowing. I was almost wrapping up then, but I've got to say, I used to do shadow John, and he'd start helping the guys build the job. He'd be helping the men on site building the job. You're like, "John, you can't be doing that. We're here to audit him." And he'd be passing him materials and that. He just loves it.
He had a dodgy knee and he was on the sick from the rigs, and I'd joined Safety and Access at the time. So I went round to John's because I knew where he lived, because we used to pick him up on the way to the rigs. And I went round and said, "Are you bored?" He went, "A little bit." I said, "Do you want to come and work with us?" I said, "It's dead good. You'll enjoy it. Inspecting." So we put him out on these bluestone jobs because Mark Clark at the time was giving us so much work because he was safety manager there. And we were going out. So it's like a name-dropping podcast, this, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we sent John out there. John was putting the jobs right with his spanners on and his harness. And I was like, "You're there to inspect it." "Well, I can't leave it like this." So he was out there grafting. And then when we formed Simian, he was our first employee. I went and seen him and said, "Look, you've got to come with us now to Warrington." So he was employee number 1.
And he's still there, isn't he?
He's still there, yeah.
Yeah.
70 years old.
Oh, you know what?
And he's a proper grafter as well. But the one thing about John is, I've known him now over 30 years. And he's a really, really genuine man. Mm-hmm. Steady, confident, knows his stuff. We took him to a job once. Well, he went to a job in Yorkshire. And there was a guy there, a young kid who was giving him a bit of abuse. And then the dad rocked up and said, "All right, John." And the dad was the gaffer. And he went, yeah. And he said, he looked at his lad and he went, "You abusing him?" He went, "No." He said, 20 years ago, he said, I was passing tubes, he said, through a hole in the side of a boiler to him, he said. He was hanging in there, he said.
Yeah.
He said, "He's taught me most of the things I know."
Yeah, so you're
giving him grief.
Yeah. Yeah. Good guy, man. Well, if he's listening, I don't know whether he's checked an episode out, but John Warder, you're more than welcome to come on this episode. What a guy. When I first started Simian, I was like, "Is there a projector knocking around somewhere?" He goes, "Oh, they don't give you a projector?" I went, "Yeah, I don't know where it is." He went, "Come here." Took me to the boot of his car. He went, "He had 2 of them in there." He went, "I never use that one anymore. Can I have that?" So take it home and put movies on for the kids on it.
Oh, I've had all sorts. I've had a jukebox off John.
Yeah.
I've had guitars, keyboards.
Yeah. Yeah, absolute legend of the game.
I could do a full podcast. I could do a full podcast on his brother.
I think we could do another 2 podcasts while we're here now, but I think we've got 1 or 2 more guests ready to come on. So we'll pick up where we left off just before your, or some point around September, just after your 60th. If I don't, I'm sure I will speak to you many times before, but on behalf of everyone in Scaffolding, I wish you a happy 60th before that. And thanks very much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks, Isaac. Cheers. It's unusual you can talk about your life, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, but I'd rather, there's loads of stuff pre-safety that we could have a good laugh about.
Yeah.